Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of Always Bring a Book, a new podcast where I have the pleasure of interviewing some of my favorite authors, and today is no exception, as I was joined by Emily Austin, who I absolutely adore. She writes short stories, poems, and novels, and if you're not familiar with her, stop listening to this podcast and run to your nearest local bookstore with a credit card. So without further ado, I'll roll the interview, and as always, I'll recommend some books that I'm loving right now afterwards. Thanks for listening. My guest today is Emily Austin, best-selling Canadian author of Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, Interesting Facts About Space, and We Could Be Rats. Her next book, Is This a Cry for Help?, comes out in just over a month on January 13th, 2026. Her writing often centers around lesbian characters and explores themes of mental health, religious trauma, neurodivergence, and queerness. Thanks for joining me today, Emily.
Thanks so much for having me on.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I feel like you're one of my favorite authors, and you blend dark humor and tenderness so well. So I've been dying to talk to you, and I want to jump into questions. But before I do, did I leave anything out you think listeners should know about you in my little opening spiel there?
Oh, no, I don't think so. Thank you, though. That's
Perfect. I grabbed a lot of it right from your website, so
that's a good practice.
yeah.
Occasionally, you do that, and people will say something really obscure. Like, I've had times where someone has said, like, I don't know, like, "She wrote a short story, like, 15 years ago."
In
I'm like, "Why
2019, yeah,
why'd you
exactly.
mention that?"
A lot of your books begin with someone who is just kind of going through an unraveling in a way that feels really familiar and honestly even comforting, at least to me. Your characters are messy and anxious and funny and painfully self-aware. What do you think draws you to that like type of character?
Well, that's a fun question. Thanks for saying that also. But I think I don't think this is a good practice, but I do think that when I'm writing, I am partly trying to work through my own, psychological challenges. So with my first book, the main character is dealing with a lot of existential dread, for example, and she's really thinking a lot about death. And I wrote that after someone close to me had died, like the first
Mm,
person that I had known really close had died, and I think writing that was a good way for me to work through some of my own thoughts, and also, obviously, I'm writing fiction, so these aren't there are certain things that I have in common with these characters, but I'm also, inventing someone. So it also gives me sort of a therapeutic exercise to be like, "What if I were like this? What if I thought like this? What if I did something like this instead?" And I find, but I've been told that it's not good, for that's not a good, mental health practice, but,
who is told like a therapist is like, don't
no,
do
there's
that.
a bunch of writers once, so maybe it's
Oh,
where it's
interesting.
wrong, but they were like, "Oh, you're not supposed to." They weren't saying it to me directly. They were talking in general about how writing isn't supposed to be. Maybe they're wrong, honestly, I should
I
be
was
I
going to say, as someone with a bunch of pretty successful works, I mean, I think it's working out so far. So,
Aw.
um, across maybe not all of your work, but most of your work, there's all these beautiful contradictions like faith and queerness and grief and humor, anxiety and belonging. When you start something new, do you aim to kind of have that juxtaposition in your themes, or is it just something that sort of is naturally occurring just because of you being you?
When I start to write, generally, I've been trying to be more thoughtful because in the past when I started to write, I was always, particularly before I had a book published, or even with my second book, I started writing that before the first one came out. So I had a different sort of mindset where I was writing really for myself, and I wasn't really thinking too much about the reader or about it being published. And so I didn't do a lot of planning. I was really thinking, I'm
Mm.
just going to write on my compulsion to write. This is what I like to do. So I think the way that I normally start to write a book is I'll write like a pitch for myself. So I'll write, this is a book about a woman with an irrational fear of bald men who feels like someone is stalking her. And then from that, I'm like, okay, let's see what happens.
Loved that book, by the way.
Thanks. But yeah, so that tends to be how I do it, and then yeah, I think it's just part of life is that, and there's certain topics that I'm interested in, like I was raised Catholic, so I'm interested in religion, and I'm a lesbian, so I'm thinking of that from a particular lens, and,
Are you also terrified of bald men?
no, thankfully. And I kind of, I'm often in a room where I have to mention that book, and then there's bald men, and I have to be like, "I'm so if there's any bald listeners, it I truly didn't mean any offense, and in the book, bald men are positively I intentionally inserted a line that was like, "I know lots of very handsome, kind bald men."
No bald men were harmed in the making of this
Yeah.
book. Um, so I want to transition. Speaking of like you bringing a lot of yourself into your, fictional characters, I want to chat about is this a cry for help? So before becoming a full-time author, you earned your master's in library and information science and worked in libraries yourself. I feel like that experience is super evident on the page. Like Darcy feels so real, like a real librarian. And it touches on community politics and the patrons and even the absurdity of things that can happen in a public space. I won't give anything away, but there's this one scene in the bathroom that I was literally like, I was laughing out loud on my balcony like a crazy
Aw.
person. So first, I'd love if you could tell us a bit about what the book is about for folks that haven't, dived in yet, and also how much of Darcy's world and kind of character was shaped by your own time in libraries.
So the book is about a lesbian librarian who has just returned to work after having a mental breakdown, and it deals with things like intellectual freedom. Darcy's mental breakdown was partly spurred by her reflecting on this old relationship she had with a man before she realized she was a lesbian. So it also has to do with her reflecting on that and thinking about how she's changed and some of the regrets she has. I do have this experience of being a librarian, and I went, to librarian school, and I have a sister who became a librarian after me, actually, and so I have all these coworkers and people who I used to go to school with, and my sister, and all of this whole social network of people who are librarians.
Mhm.
And then I've also had experience working in various kinds of libraries, including public libraries. And when I write a book, I do like to think to a certain extent about what I feel equipped to write about. Like what's a topic that I could write about. And that is one, like librarianship, being a librarian, that's definitely one that I sort of had in my, like in my cupboard, that I could be like, that's something I could pick to to use as an ingredient
Yeah.
in this book. And I think there's so much going on in the United States and in Canada in relation to like censorship, intellectual freedom, the importance of community. And I started to think when I started writing that book, I thought, oh, like I feel very lucky to be writing books that are centering lesbian characters because I have this background in library science. I do have part of that education was like we learned about collection development, and I had this particular project where I was assessing. This was like more than 10 years ago now. I was assessing library collections across Canada in my case, for their books that centered LGBTQIA plus characters. And it was really bleak at that time. And it
Mm.
has, it's improved a lot since then, but it was still really bleak at that time. And anyways, I have some consciousness of being very fortunate to it's not lost to me that I'm lucky to be publishing books right now, and that a lot of me being able to publish books is because of things people did in the past, and the luck of the timing, and so much that really isn't because of me. And so I was thinking a lot about that, and I was thinking about how, I've sort of been handed this card where I do have the opportunity to write books that will hopefully be published. And I also have this background in libraries. And so obviously this is a topic that I felt like, oh, I'm supposed to,
Yeah, you're
I have
pretty
an
well
agent, to
positioned to
be
write
honest.
about
But
it
yeah,
for
I was like,
sure.
this feels like what I'm destined to write. I'm supposed to write
Yeah.
something about this.
I know a lot of book tours or most tend to, you know, hit up all the different bookstores around the country or countries. Do you plan on doing any kind of events at libraries to promote this title?
Yeah, there's one with the, Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library. There's some that are, like, in partnership, but yeah.
Was there a specific moment, either in like your own experience or maybe like your sisters or someone that like kind of sparked Darcy's story and like, oh man, I have like an idea for a book, or is it just kind of happened over time because of your?
There actually was, that's a good question. I worked for a brief time for the Ottawa Public Library, And during my orientation, I went to this training about our censorship policy. And a part of the book opens with a patron is watching porn on the library computers.
Yeah.
And the policy is that Darcy has to go make sure that it's nothing illegal, but they don't censor what people consume on the library computers, so people are allowed to consume that. And that was the training I received in when I was receiving my orientation at the Ottawa Public Library, and I remember hearing that and being like, "Okay, that does sort of track with my understanding of intellectual freedom, and I understand some libraries do it this way." But there's obviously been a lot of pushback about that in Ottawa. I'm not even sure if it's still the policy now because of,
Interesting.
you know? But that was what it was. I took that orientation session, and then I wrote the first page of
That's
the
amazing. I'm glad I asked that. That's so
yeah,
interesting. That's really
questions.
cool. This is related, but a little bit of a tangent, and it's a bit self-serving. But at one point, I think Darcy is shelving books or something, and is kind of reflecting on the problematic roots of the Dewey Decimal
Oh,
System.
yeah.
And I remember I was like reading that, and I was like, "What problematic roots?" And I like immediately was down a internet rabbit hole. I never heard of this, right? I didn't go to school for libraries
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all of that, and I just didn't know. And luckily, I'm sitting here with someone who has a degree in this. So before we get to more real questions, I'd love if you could give like a very brief crash course into that, just because I found it really interesting when I was reading about it, and I was just curious to hear about it from you.
I think that is an interesting topic too. So most classification schemes, including the Dewey Decimal System, have some problems, right? Because they're developed by humans, and it's difficult to categorize things. You know, it's a
Yeah,
huge undertaking to create like a schema where you can organize everything in the world. And we have the organizational schemes that we have, we've generally inherited from times before. And the Dewey Decimal System is reflective of being created. It's very Eurocentric. It's very a really good example, and I think it might be the one I use in the book 'cause it's one that really highlights it. Is that when you go into the classification of Christianity, for example, there's like a whole there's more prominence to Christianity. And I won't be able to say this exactly right, but for example, like the Dewey Decimal Classification number associated with Islam is sort of at the same level as potentially something like the Bible, rather than at the same level as Christianity. So there's that sort of thing is seen through.
sure.
And there's also some other funny things like, don't quote me on this either, but like Australia.
I'm going to by default.
Australia, I think, is classified under extraterrestrial worlds or something. Like there's some funny there's maybe that's been corrected somehow, but there's some
I would hope so.
yeah, there's some really funny issues with it. Some of them are it's got racism, it's got sexism, it's
All the
reflective.
isms for
Yeah,
sure.
it's got all the isms for
Yeah.
sure. It also just has some flaws, and that's partly because and that's not exclusive to the Dewey Decimal System, though you could go down the rabbit hole and look at the Dewey Decimal System, and there are some pretty egregious problems with the Dewey Decimal System. But there are like there's the Library of Congress is an alternative system, for example, and most classification systems have some flaw because it's really they're created by humans and we're flawed. I guess
Yeah,
is
I mean, there's just so much unconscious bias, and you make these decisions, and they have trickle effects. And
exactly.
wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to go down the rabbit hole even more now. Um, so, a thread that runs through a lot of your work is this idea of invisible disability, things like hearing loss, mental health, and your own partial blindness that you've written about. You write about those experiences with so much empathy, and from a craft perspective. How do you decide what parts of those are kind of internal or invisible or something the character kind of quietly carries versus what becomes part of like the larger story or a larger plot point?
Well, that's a fun question. I think I was really thinking about that in particular with my book, Interesting Facts About Space. So the character in that book is deaf in one ear, and she's also neurodivergent, and she but isn't very aware of that, particularly
Mm,
at the beginning of the book. And so she has this challenge that a lot of people who have experiences with autism or mental health problems or even disability in general, where sometimes people feel like, oh, something is wrong with me. And this is, I'm just sensing that something is amiss because they're not aware that, oh, actually, I have OCD or whatever. I have some actual, I have something. They think, oh, I think I'm a bad person, or I think I have this flaw. Um, I think a lot of what draws me to writing in general and to reading actually is understanding someone else's perspective. And I love to read a book that, has a character that I'm not like. It's fun to read a character that you are like because you see yourself in it and you're like, oh, look at that. Like, that's nice. But it's also fun to read a book where you don't have the same experiences as the character. Like I for some reason I'm thinking of Real Life by Brandon Taylor is about a gay black man who is in like a predominantly white environment, and that's a book I really like, for example. And I don't really have anything in common with the main character except he's gay, but it's a we're experiencing that differently.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I think partly that comes up in the stories that I'm writing because I have some insight into that. And I think when I am reading, I'm looking to see what it's like to be someone else. And when I'm writing, I'm partly doing that. And I'm also trying to use what I know about being a person to say, look, this is what a person could be like.
Wow. I really like that. And also, I've never read that book, but it sounds really interesting.
It's really good. It's a good
Yeah.
one.
Thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah.
um, so much of Darcy's world in the book unfolds through inner monologues, which sometimes are kind of heartbreaking when, when she's reflecting about her mother or obviously her past relationship, and guilt around that. How much of that focus on interior life comes from your own experiences, and has writing about those deeply private moments changed the way you think about visibility or perception in your own life?
I think, sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. It is sort of, I think a fun part of writing is really uh, sort of really deeply imagining what it would be like to be this character. And normally there are little bits of experiences that I've had that I'm drawing from. Um,
I hope not the water tap Instagram story one.
no, but that's a constant fear I have.
My God, I was mortified.
I've seen that happen to other people.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
brutal.
yeah. For the listeners, we're talking about if someone takes a picture in their bath and their naked reflection is in the Chrome tab. Yeah, that is something I always think about. Anytime I'm like, "Ooh, cool, a bath bomb. I'm
Like, let
gonna
me
take
take a
a
picture of my
picture."
bath bomb and candle setup.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, look at this beautiful setup. There's my contorted naked body in the Chrome. Yeah, no, I think sometimes I am because I do have an instinct to sort of therapeutically work through something when I'm writing. And I do like to think, "Okay, what's something I could think about?" And with this book, for example, a lot of what Darcy is dealing with is her realizing that she was a lesbian later. That is something I also experienced. I was raised Catholic. I was really deeply impacted by compulsory heterosexuality. And that was an experience that I felt I could write about, like my thinking about how I used to perceive the world as a teenager and how I was out of touch with myself because I was so deeply affected by compulsory heterosexuality. So I was affected
Mm.
by, I was in this sort of conservative Catholic environment that where it never even occurred to me that I could be gay. And so I was operating in the world in a sort of like fake way without even being aware of it. And anyways, and that is a sort of an interesting experience that I think a lot of lesbians have,
Mm.
because women are sort of uniquely impacted by um, uh, like a common thing is that lesbians realize they're lesbians later and gay men tend to realize that they're gay earlier. and it's because of social constructs that women seek out relationships with men for reasons outside of love and attraction, for reasons relating to like social acceptance, safety,
Hmm.
all of these things that impact, and those do impact men too, but in a different way. And anyway, so that was something I did have experience with, and I thought, oh, this is something I could definitely write about. So, yeah.
Well, I think we're all glad you did.
No, thanks.
Um, all right, I end every episode with asking for a particular type of recommendation, so I'll get to that in a second. But I
Okay.
have one silly question that I wanted to ask you,
Okay.
and I always Google authors before I interview them. Obviously, when I'm doing
Okay.
research, and
Right.
I'm looking at Google, and all of a sudden I see these photos of this woman reporting sports and hanging out with
Oh dear.
Trump and
I see
RFK.
where
And for a
you're
second, I
going.
was
Yeah.
like, wow, what a career pivot.
Yeah.
Thankfully, that's not you.
No.
You've joked about wanting to change your name because of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
How often are people tagging you or commenting, like looking for this like bizarro world, Emily Austin?
I have a funny yeah, so I have this funny problem where I have the exact same name, like, down to the middle initial as this,
Oh, I
Fox News.
didn't even know that part.
Even the middle initial
Jesus.
is yeah, she's this Fox News sports reporter, and, I mean, like, she every possible ethical opinion that I am aware of, we conflict on.
That was my takeaway too. I was like,
Yeah.
this person seems like the polar opposite.
It's brutal, it's really the opposite, but, I do a funny thing is that I will often get messages triaged to me through my website from people trying to reach her, and I find that kind of funny because my website is full like, we're both blonde white women, but we don't really look alike, and my my website is full of the word, like, lesbian and, like, my pronouns.
Gay girl
This woman
prayers and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. This woman would not like that, and I get all these messages that are like, "I totally agreed with what you said," like, "Gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married." And I'm
Oh
like,
my
"What?
god.
Where is this where is this coming from?" So I get a smattering of messages that are intended for her, which I think really reflects on her audience because why? Um, and then occasionally I have occasionally been tagged in something where people will be like, "What a horrible thing of you to say," and I have to reply like, "I agree with you, I didn't say that.
Oh
That
my
wasn't me."
god.
Um, but
Oh,
yeah, it's I don't know. I
that
don't
sounds
know.
like a really fun problem to have.
Yeah, it's not great.
Well, thanks for the background on that.
Yeah.
I almost didn't ask because it's so silly, but some of the photos were so absurd and like what I picture you being the complete opposite of that. I was like, I need to see how big of an issue this
I
is.
would hope that I it does seem like her audience confuses us, but hopefully the people looking for me can hopefully clock that that is
I'm
not.
like, why is Emily in the Oval
How
Office?
weird
That's
that this
weird.
yeah, this lady who wrote about, like, sad lesbians is, like, so weirdly homophobic and transphobic,
Yeah.
and, like, what's her deal?
Oh my god, that's amazing. So before we wrap up, I like to end with like a palate cleanser after some more serious stuff.
Yeah,
And I'm playing with this segment called One Good Thing. And I ask you to share one thing that you're loving right now. And it can be a book, like if you want to give us a book recommendation, but it doesn't have to be. It can be
okay.
something you're watching or eating, a new hobby, something you're listening to, anything that's bringing you joy right now. So, what's one good thing you think we should all know about or give a try?
Okay, that's a fun okay, this is popular, so people are already gonna know it, but I'm still gonna say, Lily Allen's new album where she is, like, hating her ex-husband in a really hysterical, a really funny way. The song Pussy Palace in particular is really it's about her going to her husband's, apartment where she thought it was a dojo, which is, I guess, like a place for uh, spiritual improvement or like self-improvement. And
Okay.
it's full of like condoms. And she goes into she goes into like really specific detail about how her actual husband, like it's a true reflection, cheated on her and they're really catchy and, like, partly sad, but mostly I find really funny, um, because she's not holding back at all in a really it's so entertaining. I love it, and it's yeah, it's a great listen. So Lily Allen's new album.
Awesome. Thank you. Before we wrap up, is there anything that our listeners should know, or is there anywhere they can follow your work or
Yeah, well, just make sure you don't follow the wrong
yeah.
Emily. Just
Follow
double
my
check.
my
Yeah.
trip to the White House.
Yeah, exactly. Just look for someone who posts books and not, like, hate messages, and you'll
That's
yeah.
a good mantra to live by in general, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Hopefully, yeah, I can just always gauge that I do the opposite of her, and that'll be good, but yeah. Thank you so much for chatting me.
Awesome. Thank you too. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Emily's new book comes out in a month, so mark January 13th on your calendars and definitely run to your local bookshop when it hits. So I am way behind on my reading goal right now, unfortunately. So I've been binging shorter books to try and catch up. One I just devoured and would really recommend is Goddess of Filth by V. Castro. It came out in 2021 from Creature Publishing, a press that I'm really obsessed with, honestly. They do incredible feminist horror and all sorts of just amazing books. They've put out a lot of my favorites over the last few years. Goddess of Filth kicks off when a group of friends have a seance and beers and are just fooling around, but one of their friends actually becomes possessed, as one does. Here's a clip from the audiobook read by Stacey Gonzalez just to give you a taste.
Chapter 1. I only found ones with saints or Jesus on them. You think they will scare the spirits away? Fernanda rolled her eyes, snatching the candles from Ana to light them. It's just a little fun. Besides, it's my damn early birthday after all. And the last one I'll spend with you pendejas for a while. Fernanda was leaving, and soon. This Saturday night, we celebrated the birthday we would miss once she left for college. I took my place on the floor next to Fernanda and Ana, and Perla handed me a glass of fizzing brown concoction I hoped would be strong. By the looks of the half-empty glasses and open cans, the others had started already. I took 2 big, refreshing alcoholic gulps of Southern Comfort and Coke. Nasty shit, only good for getting fucked up. The ice felt good in my mouth, even if it made my teeth ache. My empty stomach chewed on the booze, sending a sense of relaxation through my body. 5 of us sat in a circle doing our best to emulate the girls in The Craft, hoping to unleash some power to take us all away from our home, to the place of our dreams. But we weren't witches. We were 5 Chicanas living in San Antonio, Texas, 1 year out of high school.
Of course, the book is spooky at parts, but it's also doing a ton. It's touching on sexuality, culture, identity, family. It's really a powerful little book. I highly recommend it. Honestly, anything Creature publishes is worth picking up. So that's it for me for this week. If you enjoyed the episode, a quick rating or review on whatever platform you're using goes a long way to helping other folks find the show, and it means a lot to me. Thanks for listening.